I don't know if you guys have seen the Deterioration of the Untold series on Netflix. It started as something during a period of documentary atrophying. I told you, Stugotz, at the start of the show today that we won a Sports Emmy for a documentary. The documentary business is being ravaged by, and the movie business in general is being ravaged by everything that's happening in Hollywood, in AI, in Amazon, Netflix, and Apple, and a handful of others are doing all of the work. And what's happening in that transaction is, as you get these giant corporations making things, and they have to be careful about an assortment of things, things are being made less well, and access is being traded for the content being diluted, so that when you check out HBO Max and the documentary on Tiger Woods doesn't have his participation, it's a much better documentary than it would be if it had his participation, because by not having the access, they don't have to be that respectful in the trades that they make in exchange for that access. The Untold series that I thought was going to make a good documentary, because they didn't have access, was Untold when they got a hold of the Brett Favre story. But man, did they do a job with that. They spent the entire time on Jen Sturger instead of, he ripped off the poorest state in the country, allegedly.
Really?
They spent so much time on a dick pic story. Like, they spent the first 50 minutes on, let's do Jen Sturger's story instead of ripped off poor people. And it was like, man, you're doing, and it'll be hugely popular because, yeah, tell me about the pic. Tell me about the salacious thing that's not nearly as damaging or interesting as the thing that's actually the most awful, even though the first thing is not, it's not terribly good either, obviously.
In comparison, it's not as,
it's subjective,
bad,
too.
Right.
Well, in terms of like what you're interested in. I mean, I thought there were plenty of details in that. The fact that they had never met to this day is pretty fascinating. And Jen Sturger hasn't been super public about that stuff. So you almost can't talk about the fall from grace without the original sin of Brett Favre. So I understand why they dedicated so much time to it. And also, Sturger's available, whereas Favre isn't.
I'm not saying that I don't understand why the decision was made. And furthermore, if your desire is only clicks and interest, which maybe that's what it should be when making a movie, surely I'll get more people in the tent talking about the simplicity of hero sends unwanted dick pic, but 40 minutes of that when the other crime that he has is the crime that does more damage to more people. And again, I'm not trying to minimize what it is that happened to Jen Sturger, but that story has been told. Like, you can say, yes, that was the one interesting detail that I had not gotten, which is she's never met Brett Favre. I also had another thought, weird though it was. I really don't understand why, given its spelling, we still pronounce Favre that way. That like
Ben Stiller over here?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Doesn't make sense. It's never made sense.
Favre.
It's like a theatre situation.
it still doesn't make sense to me.
Centra. It's the same thing. When I explain it to you, like it's Favre, it's just like center and theatre.
It's monolith.
I haven't.
Brett Favre.
Said that already.
But he hadn't said it by banging his computer against his microphone.
It was for emphasis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, is part of it, all this stuff is still pending with Brett Favre and what happened in Mississippi. So I imagine they probably talked about it and really wanted to make that as interesting as possible, especially for Dan. They're like, Dan's going to give us a hard time about this. We should try to do more. Well, he's not privy to these conversations. Production is very hard sometimes.
But the R should be in front of the V. I mean,
I don't have a lot of words, and again, this might be my ignorance, where the V is before the R, and I'm pronouncing the R before the V.
crazy.
Silent V.
I mean, you're cherry picking the V here. There's plenty of examples of the R after the E with the sound.
The thing that I don't believe, and and I understand what it is that you're saying, because the second crime, allegedly, is less interesting than the first if what you're looking for is entertainment value. But whether it's pending or not, you can't tell me that giving the first 45 minutes of the movie over to the first thing and the last 9 minutes of the movie to the second thing is anything other than a grab for whatever it is you can get with eyeballs because of a penis photo from 20 years ago.
But is that surprising, though, that they're going for what's salacious more than what's more dense and difficult to
They're
unpack?
going for the masses.
Right.
Yes. And what's interesting to the masses.
Isn't the surprising part, though, when they're done putting the film together and they show it to whoever they got to show it to, and that person's like, yeah, it's good, let's release it. Like, that part would be surprising to me, where it's just the final 9 minutes of the part that I think most people would watch it expecting to learn about.
But it's hard to do well, right? And it's what I'm talking about, my expectations for how that series began versus what it is that it's actually become, and how it is that all of it gets cheapened in the process of what it is that we're doing if you allow the corporations to always make the decisions that are just about getting the clicks. It's how the poor in Mississippi get bleeped again by the idea of, oh, they didn't want to cover this part of it well because it's too hard to cover well, so let's just go talk to Jen Sturger about something here and frame it as untold, even though I'm telling you, when I saw the McNair story, it had all been told. Like, you're not surprising me anymore with some of the stuff that you're making, even though I wanted so much for that series to be enduringly great, because the first 6 of those, each one of them was a banger, and they were doing difficult things well. They weren't doing difficult things like easily, like, let's do the University of Florida's story and avoid all of the stuff in exchange for access that people want to hear about, because it doesn't matter whether we actually give them the stuff that they want to watch or hear about, as long as we just do the big, look, we just want a sports documentary. We just want a sports Emmy because we just told a sports story. So it's not like I don't understand how it is that this is happening across the landscape. I just like for the ability for everyone to make things that are harder to make.
Favre. That's French in origin, but when we decided to Americanize it, we switched where the letters are.